EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back to another edition of Football 24/7. I'm Tony DeShields II, and I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, John McMullen. John, how are you feeling this evening, sir?
Joint evening practice. So it is what it is. It's a little bit strange. It's a little bit of a strange time to do it, Tone. But good team was here. Some good work. A lot of injuries. The good news for the Eagles is that Jason Kelsey, Landon Dickerson went down, but both are fine. Nothing serious. Browns lost Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, Jack Conklin. So three really good players.
Wow.
Garrett's fine. I saw him after practice. He had a foot injury, but he's fine. Denzel Ward was ill, so he left. And that was a shame because he and Devontae Smith were dueling, going back and forth. One of the best corners in the game, Devontae Smith. That was a fun little matchup between those two before Denzel left. And then Conklin banged his head, so he's in the concussion protocol. So five really good players. Luckily, no serious injuries, but they all didn't finish the practice. Jason Kelsey got hurt very late. It might have been the last player, the second to last offensive play for the Eagles. So It wasn't and he just got kicked. So he limped off, scared some people, but he's fine.
Okay. You guys, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you guys continue to stay engaged in the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you guys want more analysis from John McMullen, check him out on JAKIBSports.com and check him out on SportsIllustrated.com as well, SI.com to be exact. He does a lot of amazing work as the Eagles insider for JAKIB Sports. Now, John, I want to try to keep, our conversation as poignant and brief as possible. I know that this is a late start for both of us. And I know you're essentially still down at the complex, still trying to get some things done so you can write your stories tonight. So I want to try to keep our conversation as targeted as possible. You already brought up some injury updates, so I'm not going to stay too much on that. You also brought up how Devontae and Denzel Ward were dueling. I want to get into that joint practice a little bit. Who were some standouts on the offensive side of the ball for the Philadelphia Eagles? Who were some standouts on defense? And then eventually I'm going to get into the one-on-ones, 7-on-7s, and 11-on-11s.
Well, I think, it was kind of I was asking a bunch of the reporters, who would they crown the champion, so to speak. We always have those joint practice champions. And it was really, it was a consensus draw, two really good rosters going back and forth. And then you kind of push them and say, you take draw off the table. Who would you have to pick? And most gave the slight edge to Cleveland, which I would as well. Very slight, 51-49 on the scorecard.
Oh, wow.
So it was that close. It was that nip and tuck. I just thought
a coin flip day, basically.
Yeah, coin flip day. The Browns' pass rush really affected the Eagles, which is a surprise. Not that from that perspective, I mean, Myles Garrett is a great, great player, and he gave Jordan Mailata some significant headaches before he left. And they now have Zadarius Smith as well. He got a sack early in the practice. So I was a little bit surprised how good the Browns' pass rush was today, even though they do have some really good players. The Eagles have a tremendous offensive line. So, first time seeing them, maybe they get used to it and they improve tomorrow. Offensively, I think the best thing the Eagles had going was Dallas Goedert. Cleveland did not have an answer to him for him. Every time they went for Dallas Goedert, it basically succeeded. They tried, remember these practice sessions are scripted and you're not game planning for the other team. So the Eagles, there was one point that stood out to me. They were trying to get the backs involved in the passing game. 3 consecutive plays. They ran a wheel route to DeAndre Swift. Didn't work. The Browns had it snipped out. Then they worked a bubble screen to Swift. Didn't work, got about 3 or 4 yards. And then they threw a conventional screen to Kenny Gainwell, maybe got 4 or 5 yards. So that didn't work either. The Browns were on top of that kind of stuff. Defensively, I thought the Eagles also, I think the defense for both sides won against the other team's offense.
Got it.
Amari Cooper, a number of drops, so that helped because he's still a very good receiver, tremendous route runner, was open a couple times, just dropped the football. That's been an issue with him throughout his career. So he had some difficulties there. Probably the worst play for the Eagles defensively was Anthony Schwartz, who is essentially their Quez Watkins. He can run by anybody. And he ran by James Bradbury, and Terrell Edmonds was supposed to give the help, and he ran by him even quicker for a long touchdown from Deshaun Watson. So that was probably the biggest play of the day. And then from the Eagles' offensive perspective, as I mentioned, Goddard, and then Devontae, he and Denzel Ward early, the first 7-on-7 period, Ward was all over Devontae Smith on a deep ball and picked it off from Jalen Hurts. And then later, it was a crossing pattern, and Devontae kind of split Ward, and the safety help was Grant Delpit, and he got there late, and so Devontae got him back. It was a nice give and take between two really good players. And the same thing with Garrett Mailata was the other interesting matchup, but Garrett definitely got the best of that one, unfortunately for the Eagles. And Jordan Mailata, by the way, has tremendous respect for Myles Garrett, as he should. And, that might be the best edge rusher in the NFL.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I'm of the mindset that, Myles Garrett, he's a future Hall of Famer if he continues on the pace that he's already on. I'm thinking about this Eagles offense. You said something that was interesting. The interception that was the pass that was meant for Devontae that led to an interception. Was that more so better Denzel Ward or bad ball by Jalen Hurts?
More Denzel Ward. He was, Jalen was trying to give Devontae a chance, and Ward just had him smothered, and he came up with the football. So it's one of those things you can't really fault Jalen Hurts for giving A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith opportunities. That usually works out pretty well. But again, we talk about Myles Garrett. Denzel Ward's a top 10 corner in this league, so there aren't many corners that can make that type of play. And that's why it's good to get these joint practices, and why I've said these 2 days are probably the most important days of the summer for the 2023 Eagles. I mentioned that on Birds 365, more so than the Colts who come in, but the Colts aren't nearly as talented. Right. The Browns have legit talent on the offensive line, defensive line, corner with Ward, some good receivers. Nick Chubb, maybe the best running back in the NFL. So, and obviously Deshaun Watson, who I would say neither Deshaun or Jalen had a really, really sharp day. And that's why, I think both defenses kind of won the day.
We spoke about that Cleveland defense and guys like Denzel Ward making plays. I want to talk about that Eagles defense, right? Who on the Eagles defensive side of the ball gave Deshaun Watson some trouble today?
Josh Sweat had a couple sacks. Jalen Carter really sort of bulldozed Joel Bitonio, is one of the best guards in the NFL on one occasion. So Deshaun was feeling the pass rush as well from the other side. And then there was a tip, I believe, from Zach Cunningham, who's very long frame for a linebacker, got his hand on the football. Reed Blankenship was able to get an interception from the Eagles' perspective. Nick Morrow started with Nakobe Dean at linebacker, but Ellis mixed in with the first team. And then at safety, we talked about it started with Reed Blankenship and Terrell Edmonds, but Sidney Brown did mix in, so maybe they've started that. Kayvon Wallace as well, and a lot of big nickel, a lot of three safeties with Terrell Edmonds playing linebacker, and then it was either Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown or Reed Blankenship and Kayvon Wallace. So a lot of mixing and matching by Sean Desai as he continues to try to figure out what he has. And also Jalen Carter played outside as well. So he played inside and outside on the defensive line. So he's trying to that started a few days ago. He's throwing the kitchen sink out there and trying to figure out what's going to work the best.
So they had Carter at 5 technique?
Yeah, I mean, he was even further. I mean, it's tough to tell at practice but it was more like 7. He was essentially a defensive end at one point. So, and that's the first time I've seen that where he's kicked him outside. They'll do it occasionally. They do it with Hassan Reddick. They'll kick him inside occasionally. Don't expect to see it a lot, but that's the first time I saw it. So I think it's pretty noteworthy because it's a young player as well, and you don't generally want to put too much on their plates. But it's very talented, so they're going to try to take advantage of it.
Yeah, at times I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think they've done similar things with Brendan Graham as well, depending on the
Brandon,
on the front.
Yeah, Brandon always kicks inside for years.
Yeah, he's a bigger body. He's a burly guy, a big body, not the tallest, doesn't have the most length, but he's a pretty big body. I always compare him and Milton Williams. Those guys are kind of tweeners at their position.
Yeah, Brandon's extremely. You're right. He's short, but he's powerful. And he can kick inside as a pass rusher. And the Eagles didn't do it as much last year because they didn't have to, but he's done that. He's done that for years.
Okay. You mentioned Sidney Brown. They're beginning to mix and match him. He's starting to earn some favor on this defense. I know there was a point in time where he was only pretty much getting second team reps, if that. Most of the time he was spending time on the third team. But, after that Eagles-Ravens preseason game where he came in, and I don't really pay too much attention to stats in the preseason, nor do I pay attention to the scoreboard. It's not really relevant. But for a rookie, to come in and have 9 solo tackles, not assisted, 9 solo tackles in the second half alone, that's pretty impressive. Is it fair to say that he's beginning to earn some favor amongst Sean Desai and Matt Patricia and those guys?
Yeah, I mean, he played so well, and you're right. You can't put too much into the preseason, especially against second and third team players. You got to put that context on it. But his athleticism, and you can tell just watching him, and anybody watched the game, he's just got a different level of burst and closing speed and range than any other safety they have. The problem with Sidney has been that, and he admits it himself, he plays 1,000,000 miles an hour. So sometimes you have to have that damper sort of pedal and understand, people will take advantage of that. And Kenny Gainwell, I did it in practice once. Sidney had it snipped out, a running play. I mentioned this on the show. And Kenny's like, all right, he's coming right at me. I'm just going to duck inside. He got an easy touchdown because Sidney was just,
over pursued it.
Full bore, just ran himself out of the play. So,
but the other thing, that's something you can kind of iron out, right? Again, he's a rookie, so that's something you could pretty much expect those kind of things, right? I mean, Nolan Smith was another guy who kind of was, playing at 1,000 miles per hour in their preseason game as well. So these young guys are going to go through those growing pains, right? Yeah,
and that's what I've been arguing pretty much since the preseason game. I think the Eagles should and because Jim Schwartz was here coming back to Philadelphia. He's the one who coined the term for me, startup cost. And I think the Eagles should get them underway with Sidney Brown as soon as possible, because if you look at their schedule, the soft part of the schedule is early. Those first 5 games where you can afford to make a mistake or two and still beat those types of teams. Whereas, it probably starts with Aaron Rodgers in week 6. Like, let's use that as an example. you say, well, we don't want to start Sidney week 1, and then Aaron Rodgers shows up in week 6, and you're saying, we better get Sidney Brown on the field.
Yeah, that's not fair to him.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my whole point. You can make a mistake against New England and beat that team. You can make a mistake against Minnesota and outscore them because their defense isn't very good.
Tampa Bay, Washington, those guys have pretty average, maybe below average quarterbacks at the position. So if there won't be any better time to get Sidney Brown on that field.
Yeah, that's my whole philosophy. It seems like the Eagles are getting to that point as well because they're giving them the first team reps. Now, right now, Terrell, as I said, he started. He's still the starter. And Kayvon's still ahead of him as well, but he's clearly getting closer and closer in their minds to being ready.
Okay. I mentioned Nolan Smith. What was his time like today in this joint practice? Did he have a solid day? I know he got a recorded sack. It's always funny how they record those things because I know they blew the whistle pretty early.
Half of the time, to be honest with you, I mean, they could have blown about 4 or 5 more dead on Jalen Hurts. In practice, it's, sometimes they blow it dead, sometimes they don't blow it dead.
Right.
And by the way, sometimes in a real game, it looks like a sack and Jalen might get out of it and extend the play. So it works both ways.
Of course, yeah.
But they could have blown about 4 or 5 more sacks if they wanted to. The Browns' pass rush was pretty relentless, at least until Garrett left. I didn't notice Nolan that much today.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a bad thing because you also notice bad plays, but understand these joint practices are just. It's like ADD. It's like football ADD because you got things going on 3 different fields. You got the Eagles.
So you had to pick your field. So okay, I'm glad you said that. That's interesting because as a reporter, you had to pretty much pick your spots and where you want to focus, right?
Yeah, I mean, you try to toggle. It's generally there's a portion of practice where the teams gather around. That's easy, where it's just first team offense, first team defense, but throughout most of it, it's the Eagles' offense on one field, the Browns' offense on another field. You might have special teams. You might have one-on-ones. You might have 7-on-7s, all going on at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a partner. So we set, he focuses on one thing, Ed Kratz, and I focus on another. It's impossible to see every play in these joint practices because there's just too much going on, and they want to get as much in as possible.
All right, sounds good, John. I want to definitely get you out of here as soon as possible. We're coming up on the 20-minute mark. I do want to touch on that preseason game just briefly. You were on the post game the other night with Mark Forzetta and Bill Colarulo. You did an amazing job, breaking down what you saw. I want to talk about that running back position. DeAndre Swift, he came in for I think a series or 2, and he impressed pretty early. I'm curious to know, based on what we've seen from DeAndre Swift, he had that 20-yard run where he shook the defender almost instantly, in the backfield, and then took it upfield and lowered that shoulder and showed how physical he can be as well. Based on what we saw, is there anything else that the Eagles may want to see from this guy? And also, do you think it's a possibility, or maybe they should shelve DeAndre Swift, for the rest of the preseason, especially to make sure he's healthy enough for week 1 and beyond?
Well, I don't think he's in the deference category, as I call it.
Not quite.
And Nick kind of explained this. In fact, I thought Kenny Gainwell was in that category because they didn't play him in Baltimore. But it turns out that, and I don't know if I believe him or not. I'll tell you in a couple of days probably. But
right.
He said he wanted to make that. He said running back is a position where you got to see guys get tackled. You got to get them involved.
Yeah.
And he started with DeAndre and Rashad Penny. And in the case of Penny, he said it was because, he hasn't played since October of last year because of the injury. So he wanted to get him back in the mix. And he said, Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott are going to get some time against Cleveland in a preseason game. So if they do, we know Nick's telling the truth. If they don't, then you can call shenanigans, and Kenny's the guy. But the two guys you can say emphatically that are going to be a part of this offense from the backfield are Kenny Gainwell and DeAndre Swift. Just a matter of who's where, who's doing what, and if somebody else is involved, whether it's Penny or more likely Trey Sermon. Boston Scott's sort of going to be that third or fourth running back. But it's they're the two guys that are going to be here and that are going to be involved. But I keep saying it, in high leverage situations. And Jody asked me, well, what's a high leverage situation? Red zone, hurry up, you're behind, backed up, you're at your 2-yard line. In all those situations, Kenny Gainwell's gotten the first team reps. So
that tells you a lot.
Yeah. So, they might go, but, if it's first and second down in the middle of the field, it might be Swift. And we'll just have to see how that shakes out.
All right. I want to close us out on this question, and then I want to get into what's coming up next for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nakobe Dean, he was back on the practice field prior to the Ravens game. He didn't play, but I want to ask you this: do you think there's a chance he may play in this Cleveland matchup? I would like to think that him getting some game reps would be beneficial to him.
Yeah, you would think, but the Eagles are so light at linebacker. I think he might be in the deference category simply because they can't afford to lose him, and they already saw him go down with the ankle and miss essentially 4 days. He, was able to work in individuals at the start of that injury. That's where he got hurt, and then on the back end. But as far as team drills, he missed 4 consecutive days before he was able to come back.
Right.
So they've already gotten a little bit of a taste of life without him, and I don't think they like it. So they might put him in shrink wrap for that reason. I was trying to figure out, I'll give you an example. I was trying to figure out why Olamide Zaccheaus didn't play in Baltimore. And I think it was Chris Franklin who pointed out, well, they knew Covey and Quez Watkins both had hamstring injuries. They weren't going to be able to go against Cleveland. And they didn't. They were both out. And that means Olamide had to be with the first team. So that's probably why they held him out. Okay. But he's not a deference player, in other words. They held him out for a reason. I think they would hold out Nakobe for a reason. And the reason is they lack depth at that position.
Okay. I want to sneak one last one in on you, John. You can be as quick or concise as you would like. That Eagles-Ravens game, I was pretty impressed with the defensive backs in terms of their communication, and just they looked pretty cohesive back there. What was your evaluation of the DBs? That's all the corners, all those guys like Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, Mekhi Gardner. Obviously we talked about Sidney Brown, Kevon Wallace, Justin Evans, all those guys. What was your evaluation of the defensive back room in that game, in some live game action? How did you feel about their communication and their ability to pass off guys, which is common in that Vic Fangio type scheme?
Yeah, I can't really make a grandiose declaration simply because Josh Johnson started the game, and Josh Johnson is not going to threaten you.
Got it.
And when Tyler Huntley was in the game, they sort of did it the opposite way to try to win the game. He chopped him up pretty effectively. Okay. So, if Lamar Jackson's out there, but the Eagles, Slay wasn't out there, Bradbury wasn't out there, Maddox wasn't out there, Reed wasn't out there, so their top guys weren't out there either. But as far It's not a bad thing, as I said. People got excited about Eli Ricks. It's not a bad thing, but he got a pick six against a 14 quarterback, telegraphing a play. I mean, it's never a bad thing, but for those who think he made the team, the Eagles understand that, and there are guys ahead of him.
Right.
And it's, he faces a tough numbers game, but it was good to see him get some confidence and things like that. It helps players, but yeah, you got to be careful with those preseason games when it comes and understand who's on the other side. And, if you do that against Lamar Jackson, or you do that against Deshaun Watson throwing to Amari Cooper, then you say, woof. But it's not the case in preseason these days.
Yeah, ultimately all you can do is really just take advantage of the opportunities you're given, make the most of them, and the chips will fall where they may at the end of the day. Sometimes it's just a numbers game. So, John, before we get out of here, what's upcoming for you on JAKIBSports.com? What's coming up for you on SI.com? Also, what's coming up for these Philadelphia Eagles? When's the next joint practice? And if you could just give us a rundown of what's coming up for you and these Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, the joint practice is tomorrow at 5:00 again. We'll
back
be
to
back.
back. Okay.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see who practices. The Eagles have made it very clear that if Jason Kelsey isn't out there, if Landon Dickerson isn't out there, it's just as a precaution. They're not serious injuries. And that will indicate, if they're not practicing, they're not playing on Thursday. So the game is Thursday night. Obviously at Lincoln Financial Field with the Cleveland Browns. A lot of people back. Jim Schwartz, we mentioned Rodney McLeod's back. Andrew Berry's back. Saw him and Howie Roseman having a get-together. A lot of reunions. A lot of fun when you have these joint practices. Little mini conventions between the two organizations.
Okay. But there you have it, you guys. John, as always, I appreciate you for always making time for me and making time for JAKIB Sports and football 24/7. You guys, make sure you continue to smash that like button. Make sure you guys continue to comment below if you're watching this during the live stream, if you're watching this after the fact. If you can't catch us live, it's all good. The content is there for you on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. Just continue to smash that like button. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel as well. If you guys want more from John McMullen, if you're an avid reader of his content, check them out on SI.com, and most importantly, check them out on JAKIBSports.com. That's JAKIB Sports.com. You guys were locked in on football 24/7 on JAKIB Sports. I'm Tone DeShields II. He's John McMullen, and we're out of here. Peace out, you guys.
EAGLES, Eagles.